first? Who's up who? The guy up first. Who? The guy first base. Who? The guy first. Who is on first? What are you asking me for? I'm asking you.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Who is on First. I am Tim Ellerbrook. I'm with my good buddy Brian Caplinger. Thanks for listening. Before we jump in, just to remind you guys, follow us on Twitter, X, and YouTube at WOFBB Podcast. Leave us a comment. Please do so. That would be awesome. And talk some baseball with us because we think that's fun. Before we jump in, what's up, Brian? How you doing?
Hey, all is good. And look, we're not above begging for comments here. So
no, not at all.
We're going to say, hey, please leave some comments. Let's talk. Let's chat. I know there are a couple of you out there that are doing it. You know, Ryan, Michael, Carson, I know you're listening, my friend. Start chatting it up with us. Ask some of those tough questions you do. I know you lean more towards football, but come on, man. Get into baseball a little bit more and let's start talking.
Please. Yeah, again, make sure to leave us, follow us, whatever. Appreciate you guys. Today's episode, I think, will be really fun. We listened to an interview this past week from a podcast show on 101 ESPN called The Redbird Report. And it was fantastic. They interviewed one of the new front office acquisitions named Rob Cerfolio. He is an assistant GM. He was one brought over from Cleveland, ironically, the team we just swept. And I don't think those two things had to do with each other, though.
I don't think they did, but
apart.
I'm sure that he is not having any problems letting everybody in the Cleveland front office know.
Yeah, probably not. It really did something for my brain and how I approach baseball and life in general and leadership somewhat. And I think it'd be fun to break it down because I think there's some really cool things in it that we heard that would be good for baseball fans in general or just, casual baseball fans to look at. And we'll just react to it, share our thoughts. But first of all, shout out to those guys, BK and Tanner, who do that show, brought him on. They created all the content. It's theirs. But they did a phenomenal job asking questions. It was a great interview. And we're just going to talk about some stuff that we heard and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and if you're a podcast junkie, after you listen to this one, go listen to that one on 101 ESPN if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Because, we're not going to be able to cover everything that they talked about. And it was, some really, really good information. And to your point, Tim, not that things are going bad this year. Like, please don't read into this. But the approach that Bloom and Surf are putting in, I think really give us some hope for what things could be in the future. Now, obviously, players still have to play the game and develop and do the work. But you talk about the approach that's coming in and what they've been able to do, not only with some of the information that's been given to them, but even some of the new trends that a lot of teams are still trying to catch up on. I feel like the Cardinals are back in position, not saying they will be the ones, but they're in position almost to lead baseball again. And some of these newfangled, inventions, even with AI coming into the picture to help, get the best out of the players. And I loved what he kept saying because he was basically talking like, we're going to find these guys superpowers.
Yes.
And pull it out of them.
Yeah, very much so. Just to kind of break it down. So Rob Cerfolio was the former director of, I guess, farm director was the technical term.
Player personnel.
Yeah, director of player development for the Cleveland Guardians. And he was a pitcher that made it to a minor league team. I don't think he made it past that point. But he was he's got a master's, I believe. He was originally going to be a doctor, then jumped into baseball. And they brought him on as an intern. They kind of worked himself up. And then the Cardinals brought him over here at the end of last year. This was, I believe it was Chaim Bloom's very first hire. And he's done some really cool interviews over the past few months since the beginning of the season and before just coming on board. And I've been drawn to the way his mind works and talks about players and leadership. And one of the first things that I thought was pretty cool is how he breaks down the organization after they brought all of this new talent over. Two things that stuck out to me is one good thing, one bad thing, I guess I'll point out. They made tons and tons of new hires. and brought like new and you could help me, Brian, with like the different titles, but like performance directors, pitching directors, different coordinators at different levels, which meant that also didn't exist before. And one thing with those new hires, they talked about spending a lot of time in the off season with coaching staff and with office personnel, so baseball office personnel, making sure they're on the same page, getting everybody on board, getting buy-in from everybody, and creating this culture of feedback and consistent feedback with each other. You know, like, hey, one coach is seeing this, communicates it with baseball office talks to coaching staff, and just this constant, hey, we did this with this player, he reacted really well to this. Yeah, let's do that. So that really stuck out to me because it talked about, I brought a point, the cohesion that is in the management side of baseball, which I wonder, and I'm going to assume, but don't wonder, that has made its way into the player side, because when you think about this season from last season, the one thing that stuck out to me with this team, who is not much different than last year, we're talking about Goldschmidt's gone. What's the other player's gone? One of the relievers. Kittredge is gone. It's pretty much the same team, but you can tell the chemistry in that clubhouse and on the team is just so much different. Leadership and vision leaks, and to me, that kind of shows out. I don't know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too. Like, I mean, not being in the clubhouse is always hard, but you know, again, we've talked about this before too. There's different personalities that play, and this isn't a knock on Goldie by any level. Dude was a tremendous leader, but he's an on-field leader. He's not necessarily a vocal leader. But when you have somebody of his pedigree that's in your locker room, and also someone of Nolan Arenado, who is the same, kind of cut the same way. He's not necessarily going to be an in-your-face, upfront guy. And then this is Willie's first year, really, last year. And so he doesn't know kind of the flow or the order of things. And so they're all trying to feel that out. And so I think, you know, this year, everybody has had that full year. I mean, think about it this way. When you start a new job, right, the one thing you're trying to do is make sure you do your job. And along the way, you start to learn, okay, this boss values this, so I know how to approach this. This coworker values this, so now I know how to have all these conversations. I think that's some of it from last year. And then you compile on, like, it wasn't a pretty baseball season. So then you get frustrated, you get aggravated in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, but last year's season was fine. We were 3 games over 500, maybe 2, which we didn't get to the playoffs. Maybe that's the indicator of that. But
right, and I think so. And I mean,
3 was a bad. 23 was a bad season.
Yes, that was really bad. But I think, you know, you're right. Some of the changes are, I mean, obviously you've got some of your young guys like Donovan, Burleson, you know, Wind in for another full year, that they learn how to have a voice within the clubhouse. You see what I'm saying? And so then it brings a little bit more cohesion. You get someone like Nato who is working with Win, but now Win is comfortable with him, that may kind of push back on some things that help him as well. Whereas when you're that rookie, you're not going to say a whole lot, right? You're like, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and do what the Hall of Famer says.
I mean
that
100% true,
right? It just is. And so this year, I think, you know, you've said it all along. They're having more fun. Number one. And that always translates to playing better on the field. Doesn't always translate to wins, but it helps by all means. And I think you're right. I think it started at the top. And this isn't, again, like a shot, but you got Mo, who's announced that, hey, this is it, right? And then you've got Bloom, who's coming in. And so he's getting an opportunity. Even though we don't get to hear from him right now, he's speaking to this team. He's speaking to the coaching staff and those that are in the front office. And he's kind of maneuvering things right along with Mo at this point. Like, you have to, or it's going to be an ugly transition come. Now, I'm sure there are differences, obviously, between Bloom and Mo, and we'll see what those are when the offseason gets here. But, like, you can even see with some of these hires, the difference was, like you said, it was rallying a team. It wasn't everybody do their part. And I think last year you felt like it was a very siloed situation. You have the team on the field, you have the front office trying to do what they're doing, and you have the coaching staff trying to do what they're doing with limited opportunities to speak into other things. Some of the additional hires that you talked about, bringing John Jay in, bringing in some of these other guys that can connect. You know, one of the hardest things, and again, I'm not going against some of the Hall of Fame vets that were on this coaching staff, but you know, just like it's something I've had to recognize in my life in leadership roles, that sometimes you outgrow your effectiveness with the younger generation, and you need a middleman, if you will, somebody that can come in the in-between and be that connecting point. You still carry the vision, and you're passing that off to that next guy. And to me, that's kind of what's happening when you bring in someone like John Jay. Not that he's, you know, this young guy, but he's going to connect with a Jordan Walker and a Victor Scott.
Willie versus
and that's not a shot at Willie. I think Willie's tremendous, but Willie was the guy that helped John Jay, and now John Jay gets to return the favor to the younger guys because there's a little bit more of a connection there. Like Victor Scott's, not that he's not going to know who Willie is, but he's going to have a closer relationship with John Jay because of the way the game of baseball has changed. John Jay is closer to the new style of baseball than Willie was.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talked too about communication. Maybe those two just couldn't communicate well.
Right.
Misunderstood each other, you know, from the smallest of things. One other thing I want to point out with this particular thing is how in the beginning hiring process, so after Rob Cerfolio came on board, they talked about how they brought tons of different people from different organizations, and made me think about, you know, like, hey, asking questions of other organizations who do this better than you, bringing them on board. It kind of made me think about two things, you know, the importance of that, you know, hey, this team, this, you know, section of people, they did this and they're rocking it at that. These guys did this, these guys did that. Why weren't they doing that before? That was one of the things that stuck out to me, is like, now I know when COVID happened, they downsized everything.
Right.
Why didn't they bring it back? Because if you think about the success of this team, you know, in the 2000, from when Bill DeWitt took over and on, they were on the top of just creating new ways and finding new ways to do this, and then it just kind of stymied off. What happened that they stopped asking and bringing new people and new ideas and thoughts into the process? You know what I mean? That's something that I thought about when I heard that. I heard the good side of it, and I was like, wait a second, why aren't they still doing this?
Well, and I think you heard a little bit the answer in this interview with Surf, in the sense of players that they have now are different than the players they had then. Mm-hmm. And so the expectations and how they needed to receive the information was vastly different, where the Cardinals were still trying to provide it in the ways that they had done it before. You know, it's like that old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
But the reality was something was broken. They just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And so I think
ignored it.
Right. And I think it's easy when you have a pedigree of success, which the Cardinals do. I mean, 11 world championships. I mean, I know it's not been super recent in that regard, but you even look at the consistency of winning the NL Central and being in the playoffs. All of that has created this mindset. And if you're not careful, you become stagnant going, what we do works. Mm-hmm. But with the changes in baseball, and I think they started to get exposed when like the shift gets banned and those type of things, where they weren't developing players that played the game of baseball. They were developing specialty players, which I don't think is bad. You need those players. But they were fielding these whole teams of specialty players. Mm-hmm. And then when the shift goes, hey, it's gone now. You have a big gap. Like, and again, you look at someone like DeYoung. When the shift was allowed, he's a better defensive shortstop than when it's banned.
Yeah. So to pick that apart, wouldn't that be still just on coaching in general? Because positioning of the fielder isn't determined by the, you know, Arenado doesn't pick where he stands.
No,
he's placed by what pitch is being thrown by the coaching 100%.
But the players that you draft, the players that you're looking to develop, and you put in those places, you're looking at those metrics. How do they play? Well, at the time that they're drafting these players, we have the shift, so I don't need a rangy shortstop.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I can put him behind second base.
Yeah.
And it closes the gap. There doesn't need to be range, especially when I have Colton Wong at second base that has all the range in the world. And it makes Paul DeJong, in appearance, be a better defender than he actually legitimately is in the game of baseball.
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that for sure.
And so, again, I don't fault them for this because they didn't know that necessarily the shift was going to get banned. And I just use that as an example. You could talk about the way they change the baseball periodically. A lot of things in the game of baseball shift that not the average fan gets wind of right away. The bases getting larger, those type of things, they play a big factor. And if you as a front office aren't quick at adapting and adjusting the game plan and the training and the development of some of these players, you're going to lag behind in that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you saw. And then you said it, COVID happens. And not only now are you behind, but you're cutting staffing and you're cutting some of these support roles, where you don't have somebody that specifically trains catchers and catchers alone. So the plate discipline of blocking and framing and calling games goes out the window.
Yeah.
It doesn't become the center focus, and the hitting coach tries to do it, but he's going to focus more on hitting than he is the defensive side of things. And you start to see those things lag, and eventually they catch up to your major league system. The only other way around that is to look at like a model of which LA and the Yankees use. When the trends shift, they just go buy who they need to buy. St. Louis isn't going to do that.
Right. Yeah. The next thing I want to talk about is they talked about how they build player comps for everybody to then build basically like training profiles, what they need to do. They specifically talked about in this interview the difference between Gorman and JJ Weatherholt and how they find success, what makes them have success. And I thought it was interesting because those two players play the same position. They're middle infielders of some sort, or they're infielders in general. But figuring out what they're good at, what's going to make them successful at hitting the baseball, and how to make a player profile to develop them, to get them to work with that. And I thought it was really interesting because they talked about Gorman and specifically talked about how, what is he good at when he's at his best? Well, he's driving the ball really high in the air with a certain launch angle, with a certain bat speed, which creates a lot of slug. And then JJ, what makes him good at what he does has nothing to do with those two things at all. His is about zone control and knowing his zone, and just a really, really high contact rate, which means lower bat speed, which Donovan kind of has that profile a little bit. I think Weatherholt's ceiling's probably higher with contact and everything, and just a bat in general, but that results in lower bat speed. And it was really cool to hear in this interview, and again, I'd recommend everybody go listen to it if you're super interested in the nerdness of all of it, but how they look at every single player on the roster and make this development profile. And I think the thing about this also is this is ever changing, right? Because in the game of baseball, you have all these players that need to do these things to do these really well, but those things are going to change because the opposition is going to create that same profile to make sure they don't do that. Right. So how are they going to do that? And then inside of that, this new development shift of bringing all these guys to help build development in the team is not just about minor leaguers. It's also about veterans. And I thought that was really mind-blowing because when you hear the word, let's build a better player development system, you think about the minor league system and helping all these kids as they come up through the draft, rise up through the ranks of the system, and by the time they get to the majors, they're ready to go. But no, this is like, how do we help make Arenado better? What's the system in place for his profile, Wilson's profile, Sonny Gray's profile? And I was taken aback by that a little bit in a good way because, again, when you think about that term player development, you're like kids. And then he was like, no. This is completely just as much about helping all of these major leaguers, even if they've won a Cy Young and they've won an MVP. How do we keep their development track going? Your thoughts?
No, I mean, there's not much else to add. I mean, yeah, that's great when you look at it as, again, an organizational whole because, one of the things I think that can be at times, and I'm not trying to slam travel coaches, all these other things, but you have so many people that are speaking into the athletes as a whole along the way. A lot of these, especially now, maybe even Nato, if, he would talk, you have your personal hitting coaches where you have people on the outside that are not a part of the organization that are speaking into things that they've seen. And I understand the value in that because they've known you for a long time, can watch you, whereas some of these other guys, they don't know you as well, but they're probably watching just as much film, if not more, to understand the development side, the training regimen that needs to come into place to pick, here's your perfect swing. And here's your perfect swing path. And this is where it seems really, really nerdy in that regard, but where you have to get to consistently do this. Again, you look at the different profiles of the players that we have, whether it's on the pitching side or the hitting side. One of my favorite parts is him talking about the idea of understanding that Sonny Gray wants certain information that Matthew Libator does not want.
Yeah, that was really good.
Right, and learning that about the players so that you're giving them what they need to put them in the best position to succeed. And I think that's where the difference is. And when you're going to Nato and going, hey, I know you're doing this and you've probably been told to do this, but this is what we're seeing. This is what the data is telling us. And so maybe take this to your personal hitting coach and see what he says and allowing the players to have some feedback. Because at the end of the day, the players are going to determine and do what they want to do. And so even if you offer this information to them, especially I would say the veteran players more than the younger developmental players. The developmental players you have a little bit more control with because you can say, hey, if you want to get to this level, this is what I need you to accomplish. The veterans like Nato and not, that he's not willing to work on things. I don't want that to come across in this way.
No, I mean, to his point, he's talked about how he loves talking to Brant Brown.
Right.
And talk to him at the beginning of the whole process.
Right. And so it's like, but he can come in and go, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay true to this. Whereas someone like Victor Scott's probably not got that flexibility yet.
Right.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's just, again, it goes back to what Surf said and the rest of this staff, the coaching staff as well as the front office staff, being able to relay this information. And I think what's neat about what I heard in the interview about this whole thing, and then I'll shut up and let you talk a little bit more, is the idea that the front office staff is pinpointing the right people to get the information to, the coaching staff that has the relationships with the other players.
Yeah.
So that like John Jay can go talk to Victor Scott and even about hitting. And it's this idea that Brant Brown is also talking with John Jay and the three of them are together talking about this. And it's because maybe Jay has a little bit better of a relationship with Victor Scott. And so he can say something that's a little bit more tough to hear and it comes across better.
So that's why I want to go back to the whole cohesion thing and the difference between the season last year and this year. I mean, you and I make jokes about it all the time, how chemistry is the stat that is not charted but makes the difference of a team. And you can physically see the team's more fun to watch. Everybody has talked about that on every possible media outlet this year. They just look like, and to your point, they're having fun. Right. Which I listened to Trevor May podcast a couple days ago, and he's like, just to remind everybody, the point of this game is to have fun. Like we are out there.
It's a game.
Playing a game.
Right. It's a game.
I think that makes a big difference. But the cohesion that you now hear, listening to an interview like this, and also shout out, Ollie Marmol comes on KMOX once a week.
Yeah.
Honestly talks about the same things.
Right.
How their coaching staff is together on the road in the hotel, like, you know, a couple times on the road. They're all just having a drink with each other in the hotel room and just like talking baseball. The cohesion of that translates itself to the relationships in the locker room between coaches and players, which then translates itself to the field and why nobody's got their head down and just looking miserable. Like, we should be winning the World Series right now, but instead we're just a couple games back or whatever. They just look like they're having fun. And I'm wondering and thinking and sensing that there is a connection point to this between the office developing player plans, player profiles, building relationships with the players as well with the coaching staff. So when, hey, and they talked about using an example of Gordon Graceffo going down. Hey, we noticed this thing with him. His velo dropped 2 or 3 miles an hour. This is what we see. Ollie in the group, what do you see? Does this match up? Okay, Gordon, come in here. This is what the three of us are kind of talking about and seeing. This is what I want you to work on.
Yeah.
The cohesion of that just bears itself out to me in that conversation.
And then now, look, he is upwards of triple digits a few times now. Throwing the ball. So he took it, he's worked on it, and he's understanding his role, even though maybe he wanted to be a starter ultimately. Right now, the best success he can have is being in that relief role, and that may mean with his pitch arsenal ramping up a little bit harder, throwing the ball a little bit harder to get some more swing and miss.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of, I think, what's happening there. And again, you look at Gorman, you mentioned him, the idea of teaching him not to eliminate swing and miss, because a power hitter's going to have swing and miss in their game. But it's learning the approach of when to go all out and be okay with potential swing and miss versus developing more contact in your game in key moments. And we were talking a little bit before we came on, this idea of like the Thursday game that we went to, the Cubs and Cardinals, and Gorman had nothing to show for the day he had and probably ended the absolute worst way that it could.
Yeah.
But 3 of those at bats, he smoked a ball to left center field.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out. The luck wasn't there, but the approach was really, really good. And I think that's why you're seeing him in the lineup, not just because of the injuries, but because the approach has been there. And that's, again, that's a credit to everybody working with him.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the age-old, like, baseball is just not fair sometimes. You can do the best work behind the scenes, prepare yourself well. And pitchers even talk about this. You know, I did all my game prep. I did everything. I worked out correctly. We had the best game plan, and man, they just hit me.
Right.
I couldn't do anything. Baseball can be just so cruel sometimes and so random. Gorman had 3 at bats where he would have had a home run in a few different parks, but the temperature just wasn't on his side. The angle just wasn't on his side that day. But the box score says, oh man, he was 0 for 4.
Right.
And
he stood there looking at a pitch right down the middle to end the game type of deal. Like, I mean, that's what people are going to talk about.
Yeah.
But you have to dig into the numbers a little bit more and see, like, those were 3 out of the 4 at bats that he took. Really good at bats.
And then in today's game, this is Sunday, we're recording this, he had a home run first at bat.
Yeah.
But the plate approach and the discipline of it was the same. He just got the result. Different weather, different ballpark, different pitcher.
Right.
So many factors into it. But it was really cool to hear just how each player is going to have a specific profile and what makes them good, what makes them tick. When they're at their best, what are they doing? And with him, they talked about how bat speed was really important and launch angle is really important. He is at his best when he is smoking the ball really, really hard in the air. But with those two things, the downside of that, with a really, really high bat speed comes swing and miss and chase sometimes. And so it's trying to find the middle ground of some of that, because you can have the best bat speed in the world, but if it's not making contact on the ball, then your bat speed's not worth it. And they talked about how they made that adjustment in the beginning of the season, in spring training at the beginning of the season. Hey, we need to slow your speed down because we got to find your contact point. And for a third of the season, he was pretty unsuccessful, right? They would bring him into the lineup and it'd just be over, swing over, nothing. And all that time spent clicking in it, the contact started coming back, and he was just getting some singles and some doubles. And then they worked on, okay, now you're making contact again, and you're hitting the ball at the right spot. Now let's increase your bat speed, which now he's gotten 6 home runs in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, his slug has ballooned up to 395, which is not like great, but it's jumping dramatically because of that. And I think obviously when he's connecting, you said it, 6 home runs. I mean, that's what the ultimate goal for him was to be. You know, again, you're thinking if he can hover around the 20 to 25% strikeout rate, but hit you 30 plus bombs, you'll take that all day long.
Well, let's talk about just simply like if you look at his last 17 games, 15 and 30, so a month total. In the last 7 games, he's had 3 home runs, 8 hits, average of 300, and a slug of 630. So the pace that he's getting better and better as all the time goes on. The last month, he's had 90 at bats, 24 hits, 6 home runs total. So this would probably be, half the month of May to a little bit more than the month of June. We're talking a 267 average and a 522 slug. That's pretty good, man. That's pretty good. And so you can, and because if you got to take out the beginning of the season where he was. Now, you look at his overall season, you can't take that out, right?
Right.
Same thing with Wilson Contreras, right? The beginning 14-day, 10-day stretch of his was horrible, and you can't take that away from his season. But if you look at the sample sizes of when he started, it's astronomical. And same thing for him, for Gorman, when he started making contact again and they figured that timing out, well, it's also increase the bat speed, the slug just takes off.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that. Again, you go back to the last month, and I mean, what he's been able to do has been what you needed. I mean, again, his strikeouts are going to be higher than the normal, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that as long as he is continuing to hit the ball hard. And I think for me, one of the biggest things you look at again is his hard hit rate is going up. Again, yes, you got to look at the beginning of the year, but he also wasn't getting consistent playing time at that point. Some of it was because of his production.
I mean, and it's clear they were working on things.
Right. And now it's starting to come together. And what you're seeing, I think, and again, he's been this late bloomer, if you will, in his career in the sense of he always starts a little bit slower, gets hot. Mm-hmm. So I want to see him run through this hot spell and see if he can carry this through a little bit longer for a full season.
He is definitely one of those players that's like, oh, dude, when he is hot, he is carrying the team and doing everything himself.
Right.
Not that the other players are doing, but that's just the impact that he has when he's on. And every player is going to go through a hot spell and then a bad spell. But this kind of makes me think about one thing I wish they would have talked about in the interview is Walker. And applying the same thought and logic and player profile building and like when Walker is at his best, what is he doing? Because I would really love to hear their thinking, and I'm sure every other team in the league would love to hear their thinking so they could try and trade for him, right?
Oh, I am sure there are teams that are interested in saying, hey, send him our way. We can fix him.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Because, again,
if it's a good pitcher, man, I might take that.
Right. I mean, the expectation and the projected potential of what Jordan Walker can be is, I mean, it's astronomical in that sense. Like he's got, potentially a really, really high ceiling.
Yeah.
Will he ever live up to that? No one knows.
Yeah.
You can only hope to that. But even let's say he gets to 60% of that. I mean, you're still talking about an above average, borderline elite hitter if he hits that realm, and I think we've seen struggles, especially the last 2 years from him. But I think the biggest thing you have to remind yourself, and I know people are tired of hearing this, but he's 22.
Oh, yeah, I
He's
say that all the
22
time
years
on Twitter.
old. Like,
People.
he's trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Every time he swings him, Walker's in this spot right now where his at bat is very, very mechanical and robotic because you can know what's going to happen. They're going to get him down 0-2, and he's going to try. He's going to try and hit something, chase something, and then they're going to throw him 3 straight balls, and he's not going to do anything with it because he's like, oh, I know they're going to throw me balls. When it's a full count, though, he has no idea what to do right now because he'll ignore something in the zone or chase something out of the zone. It's the most wild thing. But I tell people, and to your exactly what you said, I argue with people on Twitter all the time. Guys, he's 23 years old.
Right.
He's young. And I said Aaron Judge started in the big leagues at the age of 27. Now, do we want to wait for Walker to be 27 before he just takes off? I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, has to answer that on their own. But he's 23.
Right. What's fascinating to me, and I mean, I'm sure some of the other markets around, when you get into the weeds or the local podcasts and things are probably hitting people hard. But I look at someone like Jackson Holiday.
Yeah.
He has a very high ceiling and profile. He's about the same age, right? And he struggled early in the year, and he's starting to find his rhythm now. And you don't hear anything about the fact that he struggled. And it's like with Walker, and again, I'm sure it's somewhat of the local markets.
He's 21.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same premise, right?
Yeah, he started really young.
And again, you said it, baseball's a cruel game in the sense of, you do something really, really well, and chances are other teams are going to pick up on that really, really quick and go, guess what? You're going to have to find another way.
Or you do everything right and you just don't get rewarded for it.
Right.
Gorman in that game that we went to.
Yeah, and I think some of it has been unlucky for Jordan Walker because we've seen some of the adjustments in his swing. I think there were some missteps last year where he's up, he's down, he's up. What are we doing with him? That rattles confidence, that rattles some of the mental capability, especially in a young player like that he has to build back. And you hope to see some of the resilience, but that's not always the case. Some people just aren't built to be able to manage that, and it takes them longer to process that than others. And so it's am I willing to give up on him? Not quite yet, because I want to see what he can become, unless you're telling me you're giving me someone that has the profile of Burns from Cincinnati or
don't tempt me with that.
Mizorowski from the Brewer, a starting pitcher that has potential elite level ace starter stuff, because we need pitching at a high clip. That would entice me probably a little bit more than some other things.
Yeah. The one thing, so I posed this question to you before. We're gonna hit it. If we're gonna take the same type that they talked about in the podcast of building player profiles and stuff with Walker, when he is at his best, what is he doing that makes him successful? And in my mind, he's the type of guy that bat speed and exit velo are the 2 key pieces of his game. He's got the hardest hits on the team. Aside, I believe also you said Wilson Contreras.
Yeah.
So, which tells me his bat speed is pretty out of this world.
Yeah.
So what are the things that he has to do to turn those into success? Again, 3 out of 10 times is elite success in this game, which means 7 times is going to be a fail. But what are the things that he should be doing, or we think he should be doing, to turn these pieces of his game into success, which is hitting the ball really, really hard? Because Gorman's bat speed and exit velo is not even as close to Walker's game as it is. And maybe Willie's a good profile for him. I don't know.
I mean, I would say as a mid-level player, at least from the bat perspective, I could see that, and I guess the question would be, can you be okay with that? The hype that he got initially when he was signed, I don't think you can be okay with that. Now, if you get some other development, let's say, J.J. Weatherholt becomes the player you think he's going to become. Gorman continues to develop when, VS2, they hit their profiles. And then let's say someone like a Josh Baez really does take off, which he is right now in AA. Like, kids raking. You could probably live with him as a Wilson Contreras offensive stat line, which you're talking 240, 20 to 25 home runs, 80 RBIs. You can live with that.
Yeah.
Now if you don't have some of the other development, then it gets a little hairy because of what you're asking him or what you have placed on him from when he was drafted.
Yeah.
Now, again, they're called prospects for a reason. You never really know how they're going to pan out. Like, you can have someone that is, a 7th round pick become the superstar and everything you want them to be. And you have some of these first rounders that just don't develop in that way. And they become good, solid MLB players, but they're not elite.
Or they don't even make it at all.
Yeah. I mean, they're just not, sometimes that's the case. And I hope that's not the case here because, as you said, I love what Jordan Walker does. I love his bat profile, the bat speed, all of that is good. I think the biggest thing for him, and maybe this is what they're working on this year, and that's why you're seeing him take certain pitches or seeming to be completely off, is more about pitch recognition.
Yeah.
Like,
Valid. Why he takes so many fastballs at full count.
Right. It's like, I want you to really be able to tell me what pitch is coming. Pick up spin. Pick up those things because his bat speed, you've talked about it. You've said it before. We talked about it earlier. It's in the 100th percentile. Like, he's got to work on just getting the barrel to the ball. With that bat speed, more than likely, that's going to transition to balls leaving the yard more often than not.
Yeah.
If he can get the barrel to the ball. And a lot of that is going to be pitch recognition, somewhat of a game plan, going in and recognizing what pitchers want to do. And I think, and this is just me from the outside again, I would encourage him to go up there early in the count, hunting fastball, because that's what he hits the best right now. And if they're in the zone, go after them. I don't care if you put yourself in an 0-2 hole and then you strike out on a slider away if you're hunting the fastball.
Yeah.
Now, I don't necessarily like the trend that you mentioned earlier where it's like he gets 0-2 because he swings at everything right away, and then he knows they're going to nibble at the corners, and unless the pitcher makes the perfect pitch, it's going to be 3-2. And some of that is the Cardinals' approach. They like to work pitchers. I understand that. But not everybody can be that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's his profile. Let him get up there, hunt the fastball, at least right now in his career. When he starts to see spin better, see pitches better, that it can change. But right now, look, hey, if there's a fastball in the zone, go after it. And then once you get to a 2-strike count and you think they're going to be sliders or curveballs, change whatever it is, then fight it off. Just go for contact at that point.
So that's another thing that I think about a lot is a lot of these guys don't know how to foul stuff off intentionally. Like, hey, I thought I was going to see this. Oh, no, get it thrown in the dirt somehow. Nootbaar was doing that a lot in his slump, or wasn't doing that at all in his slump, where he would just get himself in a hole or get himself in a place. Then he couldn't swing, he couldn't touch it. Gorman is another one for me that just doesn't seem to know how to foul off pitches very much. He does it sometimes. Everybody can do it sometimes.
Right.
But there's some guys, I think about Pozo, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is someone to base your profile after, but the dude can touch the barrel or can touch the bat to the ball like nobody's business, and everything's just fighting off. Now, he chases like crazy.
Right.
But, like, how can you teach some of these hitters? You got to attempt, right? You got to get your load right and wanting to swing at a pitch, but then transition your body. That's not it. Touch it so it goes foul or something like that. Give yourself more opportunities to swing at stuff. I don't see Walker doing that or Gorman doing that very much, but maybe again that's a plan that we obviously don't know about or anything.
Yeah, and it's always hard because you and I, we play this game when we watch games together. It's like, oh, what pitch is coming next? And you try and get yourself, psyched up like, oh, he's going fastball up and in, like right here. This is his goal. And you gear up for that, and all of a sudden the ball comes out of his hand in the same slot that his fastball would, but it's actually the slider that is not going to be up and in. It's actually middle, but you've been so locked to up and in that it freezes you. Right? And I think that's what happens to younger hitters. It still happens to even veteran hitters at times. Like, sometimes the pitcher is just better or just lucky because you're looking.
That goes back to that 7 out of 10 times everybody's gonna get it wrong.
Right. And I think, some of the, elite hitters, like you talked about, not necessarily like their high averages or all this stuff, but find ways to do it is really, it's the age-old shorten your swing. You're not looking for power. You're just slapping at the ball, and you're just, and again, that's situational baseball. You don't have to have that approach every at bat. If nobody's on and there's 2 outs, and you're ahead 3-0, whatever the score is, you might not necessarily just want to try and slap the ball. You're looking for a pitch that maybe you can drive somewhere, even with 2 strikes, because it's a different game. But when there's 2 on, it's a close game, 2 outs, maybe you choke up and go, hey, you know what? My goal here is to just put the ball in play because you never know what's going to happen when it's in play. And that's something that I think younger players have to develop. I think, that's the detriment to going to both power pitching and power offense driven. Like, organizations are hunting, and I'm not saying this is necessarily bad, but they're hunting one swing that can change the game. But what it translates to is not necessarily pitch recognition and just get up there and swing hard at 3 pitches and hope you connect. And then that's when you get players like Walker and Gorman. And again, when they're not making contact, it's really, really ugly.
Right.
And Brant Brown's trying to change that. He's talked multiple times about the idea of situational hitting, knowing what's being asked of you in the moment that you're hitting. Not every swing can be your home run swing.
Yeah, there's times to slug and there's times to hit.
Right. And and that takes adjustment. And when you're platooning, which is what Walker's doing to a degree, it makes it even harder because yes, you can go down and hit in the cage, and they've got some amazing technology now that mirrors arm slots of pitchers and all that fun stuff, but it's still not live action. It's still not, the juice is pumping because you're on the field. It's a different game when you step out. The preparation is good and it's needed. But, that's why I think you see someone like Jackson Holiday or Churio for the Brewers. They're just putting them out there every day, regardless of what the outcome looks like. And sometimes it's really, really bad. And sometimes it's really, really good.
Yeah, if you go back to Churio last year, he came out of the gate pretty hot, excited, pumped. The teams figured him out. And it took 4 months of him learning to adjust and what to do. And it just so happened that he got good in September right before the playoffs happened. And then he was just figured it out. Yeah. And now he's a stud. Now, he's not he's not an MVP stud yet. He's young. He's got to figure it out. But it took him those 4 months in the summer of just dude, go struggle. Just go. And you're right that there's an interesting dynamic in the whole situation for this team because there's so many players that need that playing time to go out and struggle. And which ones do you give the time to? Because Burleson's a great player to point out too, because he's not as young as Walker, Mason Wynn, Nolan Gorman, but he's only been in the league for a year and a half or so. And so he's just got just as much time as everybody else. So if he's finding success, do you give him more time because he's doing what you ask him to and he's providing the numbers to boot it? Or do you give these players this time because they're still struggling? But I don't envy Ali Marmol in this situation, right?
No.
Too many players that need all the same thing with not enough time to go.
Yeah, and I mean, and fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, injuries have helped open up some spots here, and you're getting an opportunity to have a good look at Gorman and Burleson, and I mean, it's paying off. They both have been extremely hot, and so the challenge with that now is when Walker comes back from appendicitis, what do you do? I mean,
and he's almost back. He's rehabbing right now.
Yeah, and so it's like, what do you do with that? Because he's got to play, and I understand they need rest. Like, don't get me wrong, and maybe they can figure out a way where, they can get Willie a little bit more rest, right before the All-Star break. But the dude's a competitor, so like, where's Alec Burleson gonna play?
Well, and you're paying him in his prime right now,
right?
Like if he was Goldie's age, I feel like that'd be a different story, right? If Goldschmidt was here and Wilson wasn't, you could probably stomach the idea that Goldschmidt's now a platoon player, which that's what he's doing for New York.
Yeah.
He's a platoon first baseman against lefties with occasional righties mixed in there. But Willie's in his prime, and you're getting the best years out of him right now. And you're paying him to do it, you know what I mean? Which Arenado is in that point. He's towards the end of it, but he's at that point as well. Man, that's a tough spot because when Walker comes back, well, Burleson needs that much time. Gorman needs that much time. Walker needs that much time. Oh, Sagaci's up here too.
Yeah.
He needs that time.
And I mean, now they're fortunate because you've still got some window to work with Sagaci in that regard.
Yeah.
I think some of those players, you got a little bit of extra give and take, so to speak, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. At the beginning of the year, I would have never considered this an option, but it's like, if you really want to work on some of those things with Walker, maybe it is, hey, we really like what you're doing here, but we've found something right now. And we're going to need you to understand as 23-year-old, just ride it out one more year down there at AAA and let's see what we have, because we've got some big decisions coming up in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure, and if Walker's like, the hell no, I'm up here, then it may be, well, there's one of two things. Come trade deadline, we've got to open up some space. Or you might be that piece that we need to move to get something else.
I'll even throw one even more so into the to wrinkle it. Say the trade deadline's passed. This team is very much in the hunt. Right now, they're 9 games above 500, which if you think about how our season ended last year was 2. The playoffs last year, the 6th wild card team was, I believe, an 87-win team was the minimum. I think the Braves had 87 wins. So they're on pace to have, what's 7 above, or what are we at? 8 above? What did I say?
We're 9.
9 above.
9 games above 500 right now.
So that's a 90-win team.
Right.
Well, when you get to that September and that's still very much in play and these guys are playing like they're supposed to, at what point are you going to say, hey, man, we can't wait for development no more. This is working. You're not going to be able to play very much.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're going to have to make those decisions, which is a tough spot because this whole season was all about runway
that's how it was
development.
billed, right?
And it's very much working. You can do both at the same time right now. All these kids can have this time to play. You're winning, which is great.
Right.
This is the best case scenario for the team, I think, where they slated. As much as they're going to say, oh, yeah, we had this plan the whole time, they're lying out of their teeth.
Right.
But at some point, if the hunt is still in, the fan base, the team's going to say, hey, we're in this. We need to make the playoffs, and let's see what happens, which means there are some players that, man, we can't carry this anymore. Like, you know what I mean? That's going to be a tough decision.
Well, I mean, even some of these players, like, okay, you're 9 games over 500 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to the trade deadline to get better in places that you're lacking right now. you're going to have to move some of these pieces. And that's the unfortunate side of baseball in that you're not going to have the choice here. You're going to have to make some decisions, not only at the major league level, but even at the AAA level with some of these other pieces that you have, like Sagasi, like Weatherholt, like, Baez. There are going to be teams that recognize the success that these guys are having and going, hey, if you want this guy, I want that guy.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to make that call if you're going to try and get better. I don't think it's a secret. We need pitching. If we're going to make
everybody needs pitching.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So you're going to have to outbid some teams, not necessarily money-wise, but prospect depth. Yep. And that's where you start to look at some of these guys that are either on your major league roster, or the ones just under, and you go, these are the moves we have to make.
Yeah.
And again, it's going to be painful. I don't think they do this, but it's going to be painful if they look at it and go, man, we love what we've seen out of Jordan Walker, but we have an opportunity to get a legitimate number 2 that could potentially become an ace.
Yeah.
So do we do that knowing the run that we're on?
Yeah.
And
that's the one thing I trust Mo to make these savvy trades. Basically the sideway trades. I think about Jordan Montgomery in Quintana in 2022. That didn't cost very much at all. And we got technically their mid-level starters, but they were pitching at ace level quality for that stretch. That's exactly what they needed. I trust Mo to make those decisions.
Yeah.
But the whole thing that comes in it is are you going to break things up because you could break chemistry up and then the whole thing falls apart?
Right.
Because Helsley is not having the greatest year of all time right now. But if you sell him, you never know. I think about what the Brewers in 22 and they got rid of Hader.
Yeah.
That broke that clubhouse up, and they could have made the playoffs just as much as we could in 22.
And that's where communication with the team is. I mean, these guys are professionals. They understand.
Right.
At some level, they may have to part ways with a good friend on a team.
Sure.
But
that doesn't take away the emotional attachment to the performance.
Right. I think
because they're humans.
Right. And I think the bigger thing, when you talk about the Brewers and Hader idea, was because for so long it was, hey, we're going to build around this guy.
Yeah.
As far as for their bullpen. And then all of a sudden it was you know what? We got a better opportunity. So we're going to.
I mean, they just did it with Williams too, though.
Yeah. Because the Brewers, again, I would say they're even lower payroll than us as far as that. And
wait.
they're right now, they remind me a lot of Tampa Bay. And what Tampa Bay does. They're not going to hold on to these players long term. And I think now they've got players in that position.
Yeah.
But at the time they traded Hader, that wasn't the mentality. Right now, the players start to understand that. And when you're a player and you know that, you can play. That's why Tampa Bay has success. Players know they're going to play there. And if they perform, they might have a couple runs in the playoffs with Tampa Bay, but they know they're going to go on to another team.
Right.
That's the mindset. And so, but it works because they're all playing for the same purpose. Let's succeed. Let's get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think the Brewers now are there, so I don't think it would be as big of a deal. Yeah. Cardinals, it may be a Brewers situation if you do something like that because they're not used to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they talked about that in 23 in the atrocious season. They had to get rid of a bunch of friends, and they never do that.
Right. And so it'll be interesting. But again, you talk about it. If they do a lateral move in a sense where you bring in a potential free agent at the end of the year.
Well, I think about Bader for Montgomery was a 1-for-1. They traded an MLB level for another MLB level. They just swapped. It was a position swap, and it made total sense. At the time, Carlson was supposed to be the next greatest thing ever.
Right.
So they didn't have a need for a center fielder, and they got themselves a really, really good pitcher.
Yeah. And I mean, you could do that now. You really can, but the challenge, I think, on this roster is you don't necessarily have the Bader to go get somebody because you're going to
I
have
would
to
disagree.
Who do you think that's going to be?
Burleson, Gorman, Sagaci's there. I'm not saying you want to. Donovan can be traded. I'm not saying they would be. I'm not saying that we should.
You talk about Donovan going somewhere and upsetting chemistry.
And that's the whole premise. Like
Right.
all of these players we want to keep because it's working and it's clicking, but there's not enough room, and we need this. But if we get rid of these players, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But and I guess some of it too, you have to look around the league because teams are only going to pay you for what they need.
Correct.
So at the time,
nobody could want those
Bader
guys.
was a defensive profile that has a little bit of offense against left-handed starting pitching. That's what they needed to get Montgomery.
Well, and New York needed a center fielder really bad.
Right. And so that's why that worked. Plus you had, like I said, they thought it was going to be Carlson. It wasn't.
Montgomery wasn't pitching great, and then came
and
pitched to Yachty, to the credit. And it
changed everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I guess makes it a little bit more challenging because here, I don't necessarily see, like you talk about Burley and Gorman. Yes, we have defensive replacements for those guys, but we don't I don't know what teams are necessarily going to take them for pitching at this point. Gorman, I could see a little bit more because of left-handed power than even Burley.
I mean, left-handed elite contact with power, some power, not
Yeah.
with average defense.
Yeah.
First pitch.
He's gotten better.
I tell you what. As we wrap this up, expect from us the next couple of weeks a player of the month breakdown because we're coming to the end of June, so we'll do that.
Yeah.
But then we'll be getting into a trade deadline previews.
All of July. That'll be a fun one.
And we'll figure out. You and I will break down this Cardinals roster and figure out which one's got to go.
Oh yeah, I mean I can blow it up right now with the best of them.
We're not blowing it up. This year we're figuring the core out, right? Like which players we are staying to build around, but which ones are going to go? Because you and I talk about it all the time. There's not enough positions and not enough at bats for all these players. We got to pick one.
Right. Well, and I'll end with this, and then you can wrap it up. But like the problem I see with this roster is some of the players you want to move, you made the poor choice, not because maybe you had to. We'll put it that way. You had to make these concessions. But you made the poor choice to put in some no trade clauses on players that need to move.
Oh, well, for the veterans, yeah. I'm talking about exclusively trading the rookie contracts to get something really good. If they could.
That's going to be a little more tricky.
This is my opinion. I know you don't share this opinion, but I don't think Arenado's going anywhere anymore. And so just to preview this, if Arenado's not going anywhere, you're not going to make him play part-time until he's too old to stay on the field.
Another year and a half, 2 years maybe.
You've got 2 third basemen on your roster now and 1 coming in J.J. Weatherholt. So you've got Gorman, Sagaci, and then Weatherholt coming for one position, full-time.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you this. If by some chance the Cardinals win the World Series, okay, you could trade Nato. He'll go play for another team that has...
Why would you trade him? That's all he wants now.
Well, because he's already got it. That's what I'm saying.
If he did it, he's going to stay and get himself in the Hall of Fame.
No, he's already in the Hall of Fame.
If he win... No. I mean, as a Cardinal. If he wins the World Series with this team...
And he'd still get a red jacket, even if he left in the offseason.
Like going into the Hall of Fame as a Cardinal.
He still could.
If he wins... Don't get me hyped, bro. If he wins the World Series with this team, there's no reason for him to go anywhere. That's what he wanted to do to begin with. He's got it.
He
He's just going to
accomplished
finish his
it.
career out.
Yeah,
He'll sit on the bench.
Send him to L.A. back home.
He's not going to do that.
He will.
He wanted to come here
To win, and he won. He did what he wanted to do.
Just
now get rid of him.
Sit on the bench half the time.
He won't do that. That's
Yes, he
not in
will.
him.
Come
That is
on.
not in him.
Come
To sit on the bench
in his
is not in him.
36-year-old season, 35-year-old season.
He's not going to do
come
that.
on now.
No, you're fooling yourself.
He got his ring. These other kids can play some. I want to play some, but they can play. Yeah.
No.
Come on, dude.
No.
That's exactly what he would
I'm
do.
sorry. I'd be like, dude, you tell me where you want to go, and I'm sending you. I don't care what we get back.
Come on.
Yeah, go be a DH for another team, because we don't have a DH spot for you here.
No. I'm just saying he's going to be a bench player,
He won't be a bench player.
just like Goldie is now.
He's not going to do that here.
If he wins a ring,
He's not going to do that here.
yes, he will.
No, he won't. The only reason why Goldie's doing it in New York is because of the chance to win a ring.
Exactly.
Yeah, Notto's already won the ring. He doesn't have to do it to win a ring. Now, if you're telling me we don't win a ring he has to then do that to get in a better spot to win a ring.
The only factor in the whole thing is counting stats at that point, right? He's going to want to. He just got to 1,900 hits, so he's going to want to get to 2,000.
Sure.
Which
you're not
he'll
going to
probably
but
get
sitting on the bench, you're not
next
going to
year.
do that. He wants to play because you want as many opportunities
that's
as you
what I'm
can to
saying.
do it. You're not going to be able to do that here because we need to put these other guys.
100% he could.
Nah,
He's got 3 more years here, man. 100% he could.
No, I'm telling you, I'd be like, dude, you tell me where you want to go, and I'll make it happen. I love him, and you like, but if we win this year, there's absolutely no incentive to keep him.
I beg to differ.
There's not. There's
Give
not.
me an example of another time that they did that. So we won in 2007 and 2011. Obviously, Pujols was a different story because he was at the end of his contract.
Right.
And he took more money.
But you always have players that are gonna,
Sure.
you move on, especially the aging guys. Like,
I mean, the only one that comes to mind is Scott Rowland.
yeah, I mean, at third base, Gold Glove.
The only reason he wanted to move though is because he was getting into it with was it a player or was it a coach? I can't remember. He was butting heads with people and he was just like, I think I need to go. He requested.
And I'm not, and again, I don't want him to leave on bad terms. I'm just saying, dude, you did it, and I want to celebrate you for doing it.
Yeah.
But now go to L.A. Be close to your vineyard. Be close to your family, and ride out your career in another place that maybe you get an opportunity in the playoffs again, and you can play every day. That's not going to happen here.
They're not going to do that with him there.
They're not. It's not going to happen here. I'm not saying like he might have to go to L.A. The Angels if he wants to play every day.
Them signing another
Third
baseman.
Yeah, it'd be the best Angels thing to do.
Yeah, I know. It'd be the most thing that they do all the time. All right, we'll wrap this up. So look forward to the next couple of weeks, some player profile, our player of the month breakdowns, and then it's getting spicy. We're getting to the trade deadline, so we'll have some episodes coming about that because that will be the hot topic for the month of July, pretty much.
Yeah. So you're saying we're going to argue a little bit?
You love doing that. Don't even bat an eye.
I just like stirring the pot with you, get you going.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you guys next week.